Hey Chappy, how you doing?
I am very well. George, yourself?
Awesome. I recently was talking to Mike Jones, and one of the things that popped up in the conversation with him was the whole conversation around efficiency on a motorcycle, and he went into great lengths to talk about the way that he attached to the bike and created that stable platform so that he could be most efficient on the bike. And he's riding at the extreme speeds too, like all the superbike guys and MotoGP guys are. So this is the basically the theme that agreed we would talk about today. I thought we'd kick off by throwing out that question, what is efficiency to begin with, so that if people are listening on a motorbike and motorcycle riders, they know what we're talking about actually. I thought initially that it was two things. There's physical efficiency, associated with energy and the utilization of, the old brute force us guys get into. And
100%.
the other part was mental efficiency. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree. There's a couple of different um, facets or families of efficiency, and I think the one that's very visual when we're coaching or whenever we're riding with someone else. The thing I see the most is that body position efficiency or how much work, how hard it looks like someone is working. And I used to be quite a physical rider, and it looked like I was working really hard. And a lot of people sort of said that it looks like I'm doing a lot of work to get everything out of my machine. And as that has evolved, yeah, trying to make it simpler and easier um, from a physical point of view because it's hard work.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was when I started to change that myself and become a lot more efficient physically, I had more capacity mentally.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you could if you didn't have to worry about where you're sitting on the motorcycle or how you attach the motorcycle, then I can just focus purely on where I'm putting it or what I'm going to do with it
Yeah,
um,
right.
coming up return. So yeah, it's and they kind of blend over, right? Like I think that's what we're going to end up chatting about today as well, like what how they do cross over and what
I
gets
think
you
they
doing.
do, like I remember because again, our backgrounds or origins in motorcycling is completely different. You
Mm.
were on the bitumen and I was on the dirt. And I remember that the way that we approached the dirt bike riding, motocross, and particularly enduros, was mental efficiency. It was all about not fatiguing mentally because if you're out there doing a 6 hour enduro, mental fatigue is actually the thing that kind of wipes you out. You know, it ends your day because you're just not concentrating. You miss things and things like that because you're riding flat out in the bush on a track you've never seen, looking for little indicators. They have these little signs on trees which indicate which direction. And there would be an exclamation mark saying that there's something about to kill you coming up, and you don't know what it is, like this
Right.
type of thing. Yeah, so you had to really be alert for the placed symbols,
Yep.
but
Yep.
also riding flat out on a track that you've never been on. So it was all
Yeah.
visual and all mental. But the thing we didn't put a lot of energy effort into was the physical efficiency. We just basically sat on the bike. It was
Right.
efficient because the dirt bike is you got to let the bike do its thing. So you're hanging on with your ankles basically in your hands and your bum's in the air. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. I think it almost came back the other way. Was mental efficiency kind of led to physical efficiency?
Yeah, interesting. And that would have a correlation to road riding as well, right? So people who go and do long road rides, it's not something I do a lot of, but I've got a good friend of mine who loves doing 700, 800 Ks in a day if he can. And obviously the physical component of that on the road is way less, but being able to keep your brain fresh, hydrated, sharp, and on the road you've got all these things that are out there to bite you. So yeah, you're working that muscle out far more than getting arm pump, which is obviously a little bit different with enduro stuff. But yeah, that would be. I've never put myself in that scenario really, where
Mm.
my brain is the weakest, could be the weakest link during a ride day.
Interesting. I never thought about it in terms of longer riding and street riding, but I think you're right because that's a visual game, highly visual. And you're not riding flat out. I think the difference is when you get on bitumen and on track, now you're riding hard and now you're starting to use your body in a different way. And now you can fatigue just through poor body bike interaction and things like that.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how at top level it was I can't remember exactly when, but the Lorenzo Ducati Moto GP, when he was on Ducati and he was struggling and struggling and then changed the shape of the gas tank.
That's right. He put that giant grippy thing on the back of it.
And suddenly went from really struggling to starting a podium, and he had a couple of wins on it, right,
Yeah,
towards the end of the season. And
yeah.
really interesting that was the biggest, probably the cheapest change a Ducati MotoGP team has ever done.
I can
Um,
remember that. Yeah, that because there were a lot of photos floated around about, he stuck. It was like that volcano grip, the stomp grip.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was like that, just this giant strip of it at the back of the tank.
Everywhere. Yeah. And seeing the leathers now, there's more grip in certain areas, and there's yeah, I think those little bits are really showing that you needed, and on those machines at that level, the braking forces must be phenomenal. I've never ridden anything with carbon brakes, so just that shear force alone would be so strong, and it'd be so vital to be able to hold on to the motorcycle and not get all the fatigue problems that those guys do. They end up with physical operations to reduce arm pump, and yeah, that I suppose is the byproduct if you can't become efficient, or there's certain physical limitations, and you end up in that space. It's a real interesting procedure if you've ever delved into that. What they do to reduce arm pump surgically, it's massive. So yeah, efficiency is obviously really really vital all the way through every
I,
level.
I've never experienced that like on a road bike, like in the motor, particularly in motocross, really bumpy tracks and it's super active, everything's short. It's repetitious. You're going around a track, and every line, every time you go around, it's a little bit different. But you're not connected through your bum and your legs like you do on a road bike so much. And arm pump was a massive problem on that. And I remember all of us used to experience it. And you get to the point where you can hardly even brake the bike.
Yeah.
But I've never experienced that on a road bike. And so it either suggests that I'm not going fast enough. It's just probably, I'm not, my missus listen to this. I'm not saying I'm going to go faster, of course. So I'm probably not breaking. We're definitely not breaking at the level and at the speed of the MotoGP guys. And when I spoke to Mike Jones about this last week, he highlighted something. He said even on the superbike, they're hanging on a lot more on those bars than most people would realize. Because we always talk about take the weight off the bars and all that. He goes, it's impossible. You can take a certain amount off, but it's limited, and it's probably just magnified, tenfold on a MotoGP bike.
Yeah, and even the physical action of pulling a brake lever. So this is something we had Stephanie Redmond over for a race event this weekend, and we installed a brake sensor into a data logger that was being run on a motorcycle, and calibrating the sensor up, like install the physical thing and then calibrate it and connect it to the laptop. And we were obviously bleeding the brake because we had to get into the system, and you see the amount of bar that you push with regards to pressure that you pull, sorry, on the lever. And when you just pumping brakes and bleeding brakes, you can get a sore hand if you're
Yeah.
doing it for 5 or 10 minutes, right? And she said, all right, pull the lever as hard as you can. And it came up to around the 70 bar measurement, which was, pretty high. And she said that maximum braking pressure that you see on a motorcycle, like when someone is competing, is around the mid 20s, low 20s to mid 20s bar.
As in
So
the maximum brake pressure on the track.
the maximum pull pressure on the lever experienced via the brake line was not even a third of what you do when you're bleeding the brake.
Yeah, right.
That shows that you pull it about a third as hard in the pits when you grab the brake lever and you pull as hard as you can. When you're out there braking, the top level racers only pull about a third of what you do statically sitting there when you pull on the brake lever as hard as you can. So yeah, and I was like, wow, that's really intriguing to me because I would have thought you'd be pulling as hard as you can if that's what you're after, if you're after make maximum braking efficiency. But no, so it's there's a lot of reasons as to why you can only pull so hard. Um, but yeah, there must be other forces that are creating that tension, right? So
Yeah,
it's got to
correct.
be, yeah.
Yeah, because arm pump, I think, comes from the squeeze. Not from just, like, I don't know, maybe you got it wrong. Like if you're doing like a press up, push
Yes,
up, and you just got your
push and
weight
hold.
correct. You're not squeezing at the same time. I would assume that the arm pump comes from the squeeze more so than the just the pressure on the arms.
Yeah, so my understanding, and I've only got a little bit of medical understanding in this, is the muscles work in a certain way, and obviously when you contract the muscle, then that's where you get some strength, depending on what it is you're doing. But there's also a layer that encapsulates the muscles, and depending on the type of muscle, depends on the layer, and it's like it starts with an F word. It's like fascia, um, and something that can happen with people that are very, very strong and have very, very dense muscles, but are of smaller build, that layer that encapsulates the muscle isn't very big and doesn't have a lot of stretch. And so if you have a very, very strong muscle that compresses really, really tightly,
Yeah.
then you can actually end up in a almost like a hydraulic locking style
Oh,
affair.
wow.
And so the pump, there's no room for the muscle to change or to move inside under that layer. And so the guys who end up getting surgery, who's the Brit that's had a lot of arm pump surgery, Carl Crutchlow,
Oh,
or
yeah.
Crutch,
Yeah.
they that's what they cut into. They cut into this layer that holds, encapsulates the muscle to relieve or to give it more room so that they don't have that hydraulic static style locking up. That's my understanding of at the top level what they're trying to do to get around it. So yeah, I think you're right. It's that constant holding the body up. I mean, those guys are triathletes, right? They
Yeah.
physically do triathlons for fitness, so they are super fit. But those pressures and strains and G's that they're under
Yeah.
is astronomical.
Crazy. How do you how do you go about let's talk about the physical aspects of attachment to the bike. We I talked to Mike about it. He went through his description of how he does it from a physical perspective, how he attaches. What do you think about how do you go about attaching to a motorcycle from a physical efficiency perspective?
Uh, I've changed a little bit over the years with how I attach to the bike. I think the general concept has always been the same for me. So using my lower leg and doing the calf raise into the tank. And I went once I sort of grabbed a hold of that. I started because I could modify my bike. I could modify that space. I could move where the tank was. Obviously, rear seat's easy to move. I moved where my seat was and changed my seat. I also I actually took dirt bike seat covering. You know, dirt bikes have got that real grippy seat cover material.
Yep.
I actually put that on my race bike. So I recovered my seat with a dirt bike seat cover so that my butt had more grip on the physical seat. So when you're hanging, particularly if it rains or you're in a slippery situation, I've got more physical grip between the leather and the seat, which I found really helped. The the newest evolution of my own personal lock on is using my ankles, like your enduro dirt bike stuff. So twisting the ankle in
Yeah.
seems to make a really big positive difference to me with the rear set heel guards. If you've got decent heel guards, and I get some location out of that. And something that I was told by a very high level coach in America with the lock on was how do you lock on, be attached to the motorcycle, but manipulate controls. And specifically, braking and trying to down change. And on a race bike, obviously, we run reverse shift, most of us. Being able to have a lock on, a good lock on, while changing down, i.e., moving your foot,
Mm.
was very interesting. And that heel addition or moving my foot forward and having more heel lock on meant I could move my toes and actually get my foot under a lever and change down while braking. And I would transfer the main lock on force from the outside leg if I was turning right. I would load up my inside lock on more, keep my knee into the tank, and use that as a lock on to stop myself moving with braking. So I could change down and then sort of change the lock on from left to right and then release the knee when I release the brake. So yeah, it became that efficiency, evolved to that sort of level. That's what I find works the best for me. What do you do?
I never really, and this is like I tell people in the classrooms, body position and lock on is something that will evolve over a long period of time, I think, because your body changes and everything. And it's like a one fix doesn't fit everyone. You know, our bodies are all different, and in my case, I've got no neck. So so actually seeing is a difficult thing. So I still want to hang off the bike and get inside the bike, and I never really resolved it until it would be December 2022
Mm,
at the Philippines. And I've been with the school a long time, and using the traditional methods of driving your knee into the tank and things like that. But there were a few things that just didn't feel right for me. And I never really got it right until Mark from the California Superbike School in the United States, who was over there coaching with us. And I talked to him about it, and he highlighted one thing. He found it helped to have his hips off more. So as soon as I got my hips off more so
yeah.
than I thought I thought they were further off than they really were.
Mhm.
Once I got my hips off the bike more on the inside of the bike, without crossing up and having your upper body in a good position, the I was able to use my knee and thigh and ankle a lot more.
Oh, so you had more contact, more usable. Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like driving my knee up kind of works under braking, but driving the knee up in the tank doesn't seem to work for me.
Anymore.
At my height, I'm close to the tank. It just doesn't feel like it works. I get more grip from the thigh and the ankle if my
Right.
hips are in a good place. It's real
There
weird.
you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but a little bit of weight on the inside foot peg. I just
Yeah.
rotate my, ankle a little bit there, but it's more about a little bit of downward pressure rather than a grip.
Right.
Seems to work because, I feel one, I have less lean angle, for
Nice.
getting speed, but it seems to work in terms of efficiency because I noticed it straight away as soon as we applied it. But even, riding with Damo, he pointed out, he said, fucking hell, what did you change? I
Right.
said, well, I just
Yeah.
changed one thing. He said, well, it's showing in speed as well.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. And isn't that? I think I've come the other way a little bit. So I used to sit back a lot more, and therefore my points were very individual, as in a little bit of knee and a little bit of foot.
Yeah.
And we talked the other day, me sitting a little bit further forward now, I've got more sense in the front end, but there's more of my thigh, like what you're talking about, engaged in the tank. So I feel like it's easier to be connected to the tank, aka efficiency's gone up right there. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'm a bigger guy, and I always used to think because I'm big, I need to move, I need to give myself room because naturally we hunch into the tank, and that creates or that can create issues.
Well, you just said like the other day, you were talking about this. You said you've now tended to move further forward, which is the opposite of what, a bigger guy tends to think, but that's given you more front end feel.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. The thing I have noticed is the bikes are all different. So not one system works for, different leg lengths and all that, but bikes are different as well. As you know, the BMW, when we get them, when BMW replace them every, what is it, 10,000 Ks or something, they turn up and they don't have any grips on the tank, and the tank is actually just a flat surface. It hasn't got any shape to it. Man, that's horrendous. I find that quite difficult to even get any traction on. But then
Yeah.
the other day I rode an Aprilia RSV4
Yes.
and it had no tank grips. And that thing, you could drive your knee up into it because it's got a lip, similar to what Mike puts on his R1. He
Right.
actually, it's, the R1M, he goes and gets a 3D printed device that gets stuck on the tank to give it a lip. So
Yeah. Right.
I wonder why they haven't gone to that, more so than having, a beautiful, shiny, round surface, and followed the whole Aprilia theme. So who knows?
It is, and what's interesting to me, my heyday, my 89 ZXR 400, like you think of any of those old school late 80s, early 90s bikes, the tanks had massive scallops with wings
You're
almost
right.
on them. And, very MV Augusta. They all have these big, beautiful wings that look real spacey, but they were literally like designed. It's like they got a big round piece of clay and some biker sat on it and squeezed their legs together. It
Wow.
was stunning. And then, yeah, you go more modern, or dare I say a Ducati, and it's the leg scallops are completely in a different spot or for a different purpose, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's everybody and every person definitely should adjust the ergonomics to them, right? Like, why not? Why not try lowering the pegs to see if it makes it easier, raising the pegs to see if it makes it easier. I was working with a student at Phillip Island on an R3. shorter lady, and yeah, so by raising the foot peg and moving the foot peg forward meant her knee got into a better spot on the little R3, and
Yeah.
she could connect better. So yeah, it's when you've got some adjustment, why not give it a try and see if you feel more efficient?
Do you remember, like, we had that student, you had him on track, I had him in the level four garage who had the handlebar ergonomics all
Oh
mucked up.
yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, absolutely. That
Like
was a
that,
real interesting case, wasn't it?
it was because he went, like, fortunately, we followed the right pathway where you've identified, the thing that he needed to work on, and he was feeling back pain and, and struggling physically. Like he's not a tall guy. It's probably more about my height. And I
Mm.
remember we put him on the bike, and he had done some modification to this bike, and it had those clip-ons, and the clip-ons were maybe an inch and a half too far forward on the ends.
Yeah, so and I didn't because you sit and you see someone hanging off the bike and his body position looked really good.
Yeah.
The way he sat on the bike looked, it didn't look like he was binding himself up. And yeah, I remember saying to him, "Well, get George to put you on your bike and have a look." And it wasn't until you said that his basically his clip-ons were forward to the moon,
Yeah.
that you were like, "Oh, that doesn't look like it'd be very comfortable." And so, what did you adjust, and what result did you get?
We basically got him to measure exactly the same angle and width of the BMW clip-ons because we put him on a BMW and said, "Try
Right.
that. Does that feel different?" And he went, "Holy mackerel." He's like chalk and cheese. I said, "Well,
Right.
go and adjust them. Go and talk to Chris in the workshop,
Yeah.
adjust them to the same width and angle as the BMW and see how you go with that." And it
Yeah.
was like he came in next session, he said that was done, fixed.
Yeah. Amazing, right? And that could have been he could have purchased the bike like that. The previous person could have had that,
Right.
or whatever, right? Like that's a really, I mean, how cheap is that? Three. Like,
Literally. But it
yeah.
highlights the point that ergonomics, don't discount ergonomical, design and elements of your motorcycle as part of it, which includes rear sets, which you mentioned about the lady in the R3. Put your rear sets. A lot of people think rear set, whack them all the way back. And I know personally on the BMW, I got the HP rear sets on that.
Oh,
They
yeah.
You can't put them all the way back and find it comfortable. You can't ride from there. It has to be further forward, but it's more about, getting the right position of your foot so that your knees and legs and upper body all work. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people miss that point. So ergonomics is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to bring up a point, or something that I've noticed over the years working with a range of different riders, and the difference in this subject between female riders and male riders, those who are more track orientated and choose to hang off. What difference do you notice between the two when it comes to efficiency and body position?
I,
You notice the difference.
I think it's not just female riders. I think um, my observation of that is that there's often an overemphasis on hips.
Hmm. I
Like,
agree.
people think it's all about getting you. They look at TV and they see Mark Marquez and all, and they go hips. Okay, cool. I got to get my hips right off the bike and stick my knee out, kind of thing. But then they muck up the upper body. The ones that I think that don't have the skill for that type of thing, I think they get a far better result sitting on the bike and without moving their lower body, attaching properly and just moving their upper body. But then you get the other extreme. You get Stephanie Redmond who goes out and I mean, man, she rides like a demon, and her body position and all that is just solid. So you know, the point I would make to people is if you're not really, first of all, it's not about the hips so much. It's mostly about the upper body where the weight is, which is something you pointed out to me way back in the day. Most of the weight that you're trying to get on the inside of the bike is in the upper body, not in the hips. And the hips, I believe, should follow or support the upper body. But I don't know if that's answered your question, but I think that's a general thing, for male and female. But
Oh, I definitely agree, that you see it more at track days than anything else when people start to really enjoy themselves and then they decide they're going to hang off, and the first thing they drag off the seat is their butt. And as we know, as we've seen, the 95% of the time that removes the lock-on efficiency, or it doesn't mean that they're as connected to the bike. So they end up having to use a lot of bar input to hold themselves up. The reason I brought the subject up between guys and girls is what I have seen in my sort of time coaching is I find it is more often males that will do that and get away with it and sort of create a negative habit of it earlier. Um, and I believe it's because they can get away with it. I believe they have a bit more physical upper body strength,
Hmm.
and so they yeah, physically they can get away with being in a bad position for longer because their body will hold themselves up a bit more. They don't fatigue as quickly. I seem to see that the females who do it sit in a far more natural, efficient body position.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's kind of that rock climbing technique versus strength, right? Apparently, the best rock climbers technically in the world are females because they can't rely on the upper body like males can. So
yeah.
they use the technique, right? And that's just something I see often that females, if they grab the concept, then they haven't sort of built themselves the wrong way straight away because when they
Yeah.
try, it's very taxing physically. So they tend to be a bit more neutral on the body.
This is the same as golf. I remember playing
Yeah,
golf. Guys go out, like an adult male will go out and try and smash it, but it's a muscle smash.
right.
Then you get a little kid or someone without that physical strength. They actually have to use a good technique, and it's not unusual for a weaker, less physically, I don't know, you know, less physical presence and strength to actually hit the ball further than a big muscly guy. It's really
Yeah.
weird to see that. I think it's the same with motorbikes. But now I know where you're coming from. Because they don't have the strength, they have to find proper technique as opposed to the guy gets out there generally and they just muscle their way around. Interesting.
Yeah, well, and on a road bike, what you've really alluded to, the road stuff, we're not out there for long periods of time.
No,
10, 15, 20-minute sessions. A race at last, GP guys do what, 40 minutes, is it? 40 minutes of
yeah,
racing,
something
maybe
like that.
less.
Yeah. Yeah, 20.
So that's the top sphere, whereas enduro stuff is hours,
Yeah.
days. So yeah, that would be really interesting to see the difference there, right? And that,
Well, like I said, is the thing that, struck me is, I'm loose on the bike, but not locked on. That was
right,
my initial start.
yeah,
But loose, you know what I mean? I can let the bike do its thing.
yeah.
Yeah, but not locked on as good as I could be. But visually, I think the visual game is a lot stronger. So,
Yeah,
um, the so that's kind of the physical aspects of it. What about the mental efficiency? Let's just say we've got our physical efficiency squared away in terms of attaching to the bike properly, steering correctly, minimum. We're not muscling the whole thing. We're using technique. What about the mental efficiency? What are your thoughts about that?
yeah. Well, it sounds like you've really considered that a lot more and been experienced or been in situations where you have to have been more efficient. I only remember once running into like a brain fog issue, and it was coaching in America,
Hmm.
coaching at Miller Motorsport Park, which is in near Salt Lake City, up Utah, Bonneville, Salt Flat sort of area. And it was mid 30s, and I wish I could remember, and this shows I suppose my thought process or what I was experiencing at the time. I think we did 4 days, maybe five in a row of coaching.
Yeah.
So and the first day I was like, okay, it's hot, I've got to drink heaps, I've got to stay on my hydration game. And by the end of the afternoon I was really not feeling that great. A lot of hydration coming in, a lot of water being expelled out, having to go to the loo all the time. And then, that sort of afternoon, I almost felt hungover. I almost felt, like I've been out the night before, having too many beers. And it wasn't till I sort of, the guys are like, oh, you're just having water. I was like, yeah, what else would I be having? Didn't want to get into, too much energy drinks.
Yeah.
And they were taking sodium and potassium tablets. So they'd come in, have a bottle of water and potassium tablets, sodium tablets. And so I definitely failed in that respect. So my brain had lost a lot of the good electrolytes and whatever else it needs. And I was mentally just destroyed. And had days of it to go, and that was really really hard to keep
Hmm.
myself in that condition. I don't think I ever got there, to be honest. I thought the balance was really hard to maintain.
How
So
did that
that's
affect your riding?
so I found I could ride. I felt safe enough to ride, but my performance as a coach definitely deteriorated. It was harder for me to both physically ride and then keep tabs on what my students were doing. That
Yeah.
was the hardest bit, was being able to come in and being fully present and fully engaged. And, oh yeah, out there I saw you do this, and out there I saw you do that. And as you know, we change students every rotation and trying to retain, oh, well, that student was working on that. So the for me, I noticed more of a drop off in the debrief service scenario
Yeah.
than I did in my own writing. But I mean, I didn't have a camera showing me how poor I was writing either. It's probably a lucky thing. But yeah, I felt more for my students than I did for me. I mean, there's no way I could feel, no way I'd be writing at my best if I couldn't come in and have a conversation at my best either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have been tough if you had to do 40-minute race.
Oh,
Pretty
yeah,
minute do it probably.
yeah, yeah,
Um, the I struck this just recently. Like, I don't know if I told you about it because we did the 3-day school at Phillip Island, and then on the fourth day, I stayed back with everyone from the Superbike school who was there. You know, AD and who else was there? Chris was there,
yeah.
Mark, and anyway, we went out. We basically were doing the ride day, right? The Phillip Island Ride Day with Steve Brogie's organisation.
Cool.
And I went out on the only coach bike that was available. And keep in mind, I hadn't ridden the 3 days before. The bike I rode was number 11, which is actually the one Damo rides. It's set up for him.
Big,
You know, so
big
it's set
story.
up for a 300 kilo guy. I hope he's listening to this. But
Yeah, yeah.
he's over 100 kilos, I'm sure, of just muscle. So he likes a bike set up in a particular way. So it was his bike. It had um, a brand new Metzler Racetech K3 on the rear,
Yeah.
and in hindsight, we know now that the tire pressures were way too high. But I
Oh,
just
yeah.
typical, I just get on a coach bike and ride it. I don't go and check everything because we got a workshop that does all that sort of stuff. So I've ridden this bike out. It's set up for Damo. I'm 20 or 30 kilos lighter than him, and I've gone out and it's about 11-degree air temperature. So it's
Right.
quite
Cold.
cool. Yeah, correct. So I go out and they put me in the red group, the fast group. So I go out and, spend a lap warming up and then build up really quickly to speed. Well, the cold tearing of that tire was horrendous. Like we destroyed the tire in the first session. But I remember in that session, the bike was behaving, quite erratic. It wasn't normal, it was spinning up out of corners. So you're
Yep.
coming out of, turn 12 over 200 kilometers an hour in the back end, spinning up.
Yep.
Um, it felt unstable. The front was pretty good, but then we went back in, and then Chris had a bit of a play with suspension, dropped the air pressures, so he could try and recover the tire because it had lost its grip basically,
Yeah.
and it scalloped and everything. So I go back out, and now there's a complete change in the damping, and it was really, really weird. Like it
Right.
felt bouncy because he actually reversed the damping to keep the back wheel on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. Yep.
So, so it was much softer in the rebound and stiffer in the compression, which I was completely opposite to what I would normally do. But
Right.
the point is, my attention was so much on
Yes.
that bike. You know what I mean? Like, the old metaphor that Keith uses in the books. You got $10 worth of attention to spend. Where are you going to spend this? And I'm spending about $8 of it on the motorcycle, and my riding was terrible. I went out and I just never felt comfortable for those 2 sessions. But the point I took away from that is mental efficiency can be affected by many things. And it's all about where are you giving your $10 of attention. And if it goes to the motorbike and all that, your riding is going to suffer as a result. But what's interesting, I also got tired
Oh, yeah.
because I was
Yep.
working, it had a reverse effect as well. So my physical efficiency, I believe, even declined. I know there was something there because when we went out again in the third session, we just took out one of the new mega bikes
Oh,
and
yeah.
which were rev limited, rode them.
Mm.
Completely different result, right?
Yeah.
Physically different, mentally completely different. So the point for me is one of the keys to mental efficiency is to recognize where you're giving your attention or spending your attention and make sure it's on the right things. Hence all the drills we do at the superbike school.
Yeah, and I suppose if we define what efficiency actually means, like if we were to pull up the dictionary, and really like agree on a definition between us two on just that word. It's being able to make for me. It's being able to make a correct decision using the correct techniques and applying it correctly, right? So anything that gets in the way of that makes you less efficient. So yeah, if you got to spend a bunch of attention tipping into a turn as to, okay, is this going to hold the line I want? Do I need to push on the bar more? Oh, I do. I'm a little bit wide. Oh, if I'm not locked on, then I've loaded up the inside bar. So I need to, what do I do about that? It's too late now. Like
Yep.
those three things that have happened before you even in the middle of the turn,
Yeah.
you, you can't then try and define to me that that's going to be your best segment time going through there. So, um, yeah, things that get in the way or being able to simplify everything. And I think that's, yeah, it'd be awesome to chat to those top people about how they do that, how they when they get everything perfect. Because this is the thing, right? Once you've got everything set up exactly the way you want it, and you want to push and aim for another tenth out of a sector, how do they find that? Um, yeah, because if they're riding around an issue or they're riding around tire wear, or the GP guys are worried that the little light's saying you've got too much pressure in your front tire,
Yeah. Right.
you've got to change your approach. Like that's another thing they have to factor in, right? Like that would be an amazing conversation to have how they can factor in those conditions, world championships, competitors. Oh, my main rival's 3 points behind, 3 places behind. So do
Yeah.
I strive for one more point, or do I rest and recover and wait for the back tire?
But that says that you could do that. It's like, um, and again, we're not MotoGP riders, and I've never spoken to one, except for Mike. But the point is, it's like if I go out there and everything is sweet, right? The bike is behave. I'm not thinking about the motorcycle. All of the things like locking on and body position and line and all that is pretty sweet, and I'm not thinking about it. It's almost unconscious. My peripheral vision's working well. Then suddenly I find that now there's capacity to think about additional things like getting the bike pointed quickly and then timing of the throttle. Like, for me, that's one thought pattern that I know has crept in over the years. Now I'm thinking about exactly when that throttle goes on, a
Yeah,
little bit earlier, a little bit earlier. And then the other day when it gets all busy again, I go, "Ah, all that stuff's gone. There's nothing. It's all about bike first and then line. And, I haven't even got the throttle control except slam it on when you come out of the corner and hope it grips kind of thing.
yeah, yeah.
But I wonder if it's like that when everything's sweet, when the bike is working, they now have the capacity to take notice of lap times because, like, Mike was saying, they got the lap time on the dash in his case, so they can read that, take notice of what that is, change the speed. I think that's got to be a part of it.
Yeah, and then how do we prove the theory? You take yourself and put something that's unknown into that situation, right? So, say we go to a brand new track with CSS, aren't we lucky? We get to go and go to amazing places. And sometimes you go to somewhere you've never been before.
Yeah.
And normally for us in White Group, the first classroom session, the first on-train session is what?
Reference points.
Right. So we're going to roll out to a brand new track
Yeah.
that we might have done a couple of laps on. If we're really lucky, we get out before the students do,
Yep.
and we've got to try and find something that we can use as a reference point for ourselves
Yeah.
and also point out for our students, right? Because we should turn up when they go, "What do you use here?" Or "I'm trying to find something here," and you want to have something in your arsenal, right? So it's really interesting. So when you go to a brand new racetrack that you've never been to before, if you're lucky and we're on a Beamer and we're on something that at least is familiar, how do you find that? Like, how does that play in your mind riding a new track for the first time? What do you do different?
Well, that
Do you
was
go
that
out,
was that was Philippines, Clark with 21 corners or 22
right?
corners or whatever. And first group level 4 races. Like they're just you load it up with level, races who are riding Panigale V Ras on their home track.
Yeah,
For me, it's always and I apply this on range riding. It's the old as you'd know it as apex orientation. I am more of a observe the second half of the corner and then steer once the second half of the corner looks right. I
right.
know where I want to be on the exit and all that. So it's more about minimizing. Well, I don't worry about the turn point at all.
yeah.
and I just get a feel for the corner kind of thing and look at the back end. But isn't that related to the idea that you know, I think Stephen Covey has this point in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Um, what is it? Begin with the end in mind. You know,
Yeah, right.
so and you know, planning. When if you're doing timing, you always plan from the end backwards. And I think it's the same thing in developing a plan around a track. It's you got to know where that second half of the corner where you need to be in the exit. You know, whether it's two right-hand corners connected or a right or a left or a left or a right or something. And that sets you up for the turn in. Then the turn in, I think, is just a simple thing. Because as you know, well, how many laps would we get at the most to learn that track? Two?
Or
I don't know
yeah,
about four. I
yeah,
can't remember ever getting four, but I generally work on a two lap strategy. But
yeah,
then, but
yeah,
then you guys do to me what because I think the first time around Taupo, I turn over there, it's raining.
yeah,
I get there late because the flight's are delayed. I come in the morning and then you go, oh, you're on bike, and I go out and I've got to lead people around the track, and I don't even know which direction it runs.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But that's how I approach it. What do you do?
So I use a different phraseology, or just listening to your phraseology, the back end of the turn. For
Yep.
me, I look for the line that I know I can jam the gas on. So
Yep.
um, interesting, but that's slightly different, right? So for me, I look for when I'm happy to commit and then just get into it. Um,
Which is still a reference to the exit
100%.
part of your
Yeah,
line.
100%. So for me, I suppose it's more apex and exit,
Yep.
or just, yeah, trying to plot the line for exit. So once I'm sort of happy I can get in there and I'm not going to burn myself getting out, then I throw it in. And, thinking about that old style of riding I used to have, that probably links to what I did there.
Yep.
I tend to go in and I try and bump the pace up, which is it sounds sort of arrogant, but I don't like rolling around at a low pace at a new track.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of go in to a corner not too hot, but with enough pace so that I can at least understand where I think I need to be braking and where I need to be off the brakes. I think me being working out where I need to be off the brakes links into that. Can I then get the line and get out? So
Yeah.
therefore, I tend to charge a few of the turns to sort of see what it looks like at pace to see that back end.
Does it ever
Come.
not work for you?
Well, yeah, but um, interestingly, the times that will burn will be a decreasing radius
Yeah, right.
turn, um, or a bus stop over 90, and the bus stop over 90 is something I'm happy with because I'll just slam it, right?
Yeah, quick steer.
So I don't tend to have that fear of not being able to make it around that. But the decreasing radius, you commit and you run out of lean angle, then
Yeah.
what do you have? So yeah, it's definitely bad at smaller, tighter tracks, so bucket style tracks. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that style.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I just think I remember going to Sepang and being like, I've never been here. I've seen a lap on GP or whatever. Um, and as soon as I started bumping up the pace, I felt better and better and better, uh, and was able to link it together a bit more. It reminded me of Sydney quite a lot, where
Oh
the
yeah.
flow came when the pace came up. It felt more natural in that instance. Yeah.
Do you how much do you like from a actually trying to get the right question here from a visual perspective because that's part of that mental efficiency. Do you what do you generally look at visually, as you go through a corner? Is there a pattern or a theme there that you how you use your eyes? And how much do you rely on and use your peripheral vision?
I probably use a focused view more, and I use my focused view for key indicators. Normally, a braking marker is I
Hmm.
like to have a marker for where I get on the brakes. I used to use the standard sort of turn point apex exit a lot, and with my previous style of riding, the lines were very straight, so that worked. Whereas now I've moved away from having key like anchor points or breadcrumbs to more of a line plotting exercise.
Yep.
So, um, and I think coming into the turn with the individual braking markers or location markers, uh, identify early and then try and commit it to peripheral vision as soon as I can.
Right.
So I identify where it is and then let it go so I can look for the arc or the line plot I really wanna be tracking. Um, I think that's the coming in, that's the big switch, and then you're coming out the line plot or the looking for the vanishing point or the looking up, less for an individual point and more for general space.
Right.
Um, does that make sense? I feel
It
like
does.
I've seen
It
some
does.
things coming out, but
No, it does. I,
changed over time for sure.
well, I noticed it now. Like I'm riding faster now than I've ever ridden, and the big improvement that's occurred in the last 12 months
Mhm.
has been really pushing, like what Ian Groom, he prompted this actually, this
Mhm.
accuracy around the apex, like being really tight on the apex. Because I remember I went out and we were riding down Phillip Island doing a couple of laps together, and we went through turn one, Phillip Island, then into two, and I thought I'm pretty good at turn two, at high speed. And I've gone in, I've used the double apex line into turn through turn two, and I'm probably, I don't know, within a foot of
Mhm.
the apex on the entry. And then I come back in and I'm thinking he's gonna go, yeah, that's pretty cool through turn two. And I come
Yeah.
back and he goes, man, your apexes are shit. And it really like it stuck me. I go, what do you mean? He goes,
Yeah.
if it's not a millimeter from it, he said, you're missing it. I
Yeah.
go, really? So I really, and like, I took it to heart and have focused on it. And you know what I found is that I'm more accurate now if I get the focus of the main attention of my vision away from that apex a little earlier, more
Oh
to,
yeah.
more to the line plot through the exit, and then, but really concentrate on, making sure it's in my peripheral vision. I've actually got more accurate by getting my eyes up a tad earlier.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Um, but when you move your eye up earlier, you just said then that you are moving it from a focus view to a peripheral view. So
it's still there. It's in my attention.
yeah, so the attention hasn't changed. You haven't given it away earlier. You haven't gone right. I'm happy. I'm hitting that, so I'm no longer going to focus on it. You are you're actually opening your visual window, right? So instead of looking at one dot,
Yeah.
now by letting
Yeah.
it go,
Yeah.
but
Right.
keeping it peripheral, you probably have more sense of space and time.
And location, because that's actually one of the point, the teach
Therefore,
points.
location.
Yeah, your location in the corner is more accurate by having a wider view. That's
And you
interesting.
can probably do more about it, right?
Yeah.
So you can pick up that you're a little bit wider,
Yeah.
or you're not quite on what you want. You
Yeah.
could make a difference. You could physically make a change. And if you're actually, not too far off it, then whether it's a hook or
Mm.
whether it's a change of bar input, then you could actually increase your accuracy. You could monitor your accuracy before it turns into a miss,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. I had a kid here at Manfield, New Zealand, on a R15, might have been. No, it was a 300. He was on a 300. A kid called Hayden Fordyce, a lovely Kiwi boy who's gone to Asia Talent Cup, done very well. I think he placed third, maybe fourth in this year's Asia Talent Cup. And working with him at Manfield, this kid had phenomenal body position and great mid-turn speed. Turn one, so very tight, long straight, down four gears on a little bike, and pitch it hard, right? Almost like a hairpin. It's sort of probably a 130-degree turn. And there were sometimes you'd be off the apex by half a meter. Sometimes it'd be off by a meter. Um, and still be able to drive hard and still be sort of accurate coming out and I had that conversation around, well, how close to the apex are you, and I think I'm getting it, and I was like, well, tell me what does getting it mean? Where would you want to be? Oh, I want my wheel to be that far off the inside line. So I'm like, okay, where will your elbow be? Where will blah blah blah, have the discussion. Okay, cool, let's aim for that. Well, next session there wasn't really any adjustment. He still wasn't super accurate. Sorry, Hayden. At that time, and he kind of wrote it off. I'm like, well, if you can't put the bike exactly where you want it to be each lap, then
Yeah.
how are you going to know to be able to increase speed? There's no if you don't have a location like I can always hit this point. then when you try and add speed going in or make a change, how do you know if it's going to work or not? Because your corner changes every time you go around it because you're not being accurate. And so I then penalised him every apex he missed by saying, if you miss an apex, it'll cost you 5 press ups. And so every time he went past turn one, if he missed the apex, I go in front and I hold up my finger. I was like, that's one. And we got up to 15 press ups. He missed it 3 times in a session.
Yeah.
And I brought him back in. I was like, right, we've got to do 15 press ups. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, you missed 3 apexes. So
Yeah.
you owe me 15 press ups. And I was a gentleman. I did it with. I said, everyone you do, I'll do with you. But then accuracy came up and up and up because he was a negative to missing an apex.
Yeah.
And also on those smaller bikes, if you leave a meter, another guy's just going to park their bike there, right?
It
They're not
matters.
going to.
That meter or a foot matters.
Absolutely.
I don't think people realize it. Like not only parking bikes, it's the straightest line through the corner.
Yeah. If we took a meter off the exit of every corner, most riders would notice. So if you're a meter wide on the apex of the corner, you've moved your whole line a meter to the left or right, whichever is the wrong way,
Yeah.
before you even anywhere near it. All of
Yeah.
us want a bit more room on exit, right? So yeah, we get that room by being accurate on the apex.
Yeah. I never really got it till Ian said to me, my apex is a shit. And I thought that was pretty good. That my definition of good was being
Yeah,
wrong.
I feel, I understand that feeling. Anytime I ride with Adam Raff,
Yeah, he's the
uh,
same. Hey, he's super accurate.
it's disgusting
Yeah.
how accurate that person can be on a motorcycle. And every time you see him, it tells me I need to be more accurate.
Yeah. You see Knackers? He's the same. I think that was one of the big improvements he made because, he's a gun. And I got a couple of photos there, from Morgan Park, and holy mackerel, he's right on that white line. But, but so is Ian, so is Adam Raff. Yeah, it's part of the game.
Yeah. And I suppose it ties all the way back to efficiency. Like at the end of the day, we're making the most out of the track we can, right? So
Well, that's an efficient line.
they are, they are. Yeah.
It's the most efficient line is the shortest line through that corner, which is the straightest line.
Yeah. And it would probably give you the most amount of options, right? So therefore, yeah, it should be easier.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered that topic pretty much to death.
Yeah,
And
that's been cool.
yeah, I got a bit out of that. Actually, there was a couple of things that you're doing that I like this. I gotta watch Chappy more.
Well, I like your explanation of seeing the back end of the turn. Um, yeah, on a new place, right?
Well, that's
Because
street riding. This is like everyone I ride with on the ranges. Like we've got this range not far from here, the Gillies Range, which is 263 corners. It
yeah,
is magnificent. And the majority of people I ride with, they turn in way too early.
mm,
Right? They end up with a lot of lean angle on the second half of the corner. The throttle controls are delayed, everything, but it feels safe on the entry. And then they follow me and they go, one of the first comments they make is, man, you turn in really late compared to when I do. That's a big one. I go, that's because I'm not thinking about the first half. I only think about the second half. And the second half matters on a street ride.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You get it wrong. And I think that's the basis of street riding. I wonder if it came from dirt. I don't know. But maybe it did. But it definitely has application on the track. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I like the coining of the phrase, particularly in the new bit. When we lose that efficiency, what do we think about? Where do
yeah.
we put $2 of attention? You
Yeah.
you define it that way, and I was defining it a certain other way. So I could definitely change. Try that next time we go somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks for the tips. I got two other things with that. Oh, are you there? New stuff, new technology. I found something this morning online that I hadn't even heard about, and I'm not sure if you've heard about it. It's called a cylinder deactivation system, which is
Oh,
creeping into motorcycles. And the way that they describe it is, in V configuration engines, they suffer from a heat management problem. So the rear bank of the engine gets warm um, against the front bank because of the airflow. There's no airflow on the rear part of it. And they have this thing, cylinder deactivation. So the one that's described here is Harley Davidson. They introduced what do they call it? Engine idle temperature management system in 2008, followed by Indian. And Ducati have even got it. So Ducati use this on its V4 engine, effectively switching off the rear cylinder so the heat is managed. But as a side effect, the bike also runs much cleaner. For example, their 1158cc Gran Turismo engine turns into a 579cc twin when the system is activated. At first, it was limited to idle, but now they've extended it to low speed or low throttle riding. And it won't be long, they're saying that before this creeps into a lot more brands. But I hadn't even thought about it. But, the other question that come to mind is, number one, what is the advantage of a V4 over an inline four if heat is a problem? I wonder what it is. I don't know. Do you know?
So to go right back to the start, I had heard of cylinder activation in cars, specifically some of the European stuff. So I know Audi did it for a bit a while ago. They were trying to get the performance of a V8 uh, to still be there without it guzzling all the gas, right? So they started switching cylinders off to try and make it when you're cruising, then it'll be more efficient. And I'm guessing it's better for emissions as well. If you're using less hydrocarbons, then surely less stuff comes out the back end. So I'd heard of it in cars. I've never heard of it in bikes at all. No. So interesting that because I suppose fuel efficiency isn't something normally we worry about, right? If you ride a motorcycle, it's not
No.
because my motorcycle has 4.2 kilometers through the loop. Like there's not many people that talk about that in the motorcycle realm, right?
I think it's the first time I heard it just then.
If I asked you what the burn rate of an S1000 is, would you know?
It's a lot at 300, I can tell you that.
Yeah, yeah. I do 4 tires per day at Phillip Island. That's how we work economy, right? Yeah, I suppose there has to be benefits to the V4 over the inline four if MotoGP, like every single brand bar Yamaha does it, right? So my understanding of, and that was like the R1, right, with the cross plane, so an inline four that wasn't. Um, and
That was
again,
firing order, wasn't it? The cross plane is
correct,
the firing order thing. Like the big bang is, two up, two down kind of thing. It didn't work on that quadrant kind of scenario.
correct, yeah. So they tried to get the benefit of a V4, but in the cylinder configuration of the inline four, right, for the
Mm.
handling. So I have never. Ooh, I've ridden a couple of MVs. I'm unsure if they've got counter-rotating crankshafts.
Yeah.
So um, that's the one of the things they talk about, right? Obviously,
So it doesn't wheelie kind of thing. It spins the opposite direction. It tends to
well, yeah, and
rotate.
also if you've got a counter-rotating crankshaft, then in theory, the gyroscopic force of a bike wanting to turn or not wanting to change direction is less,
Oh, wow.
right? So you make wheels carbon fiber, there's less spinning
Correct.
force,
Right. But that's a weight.
right? Well, and yes, yeah. So that's another reason. And then if you do V's, you can do different things.
Mm.
Obviously they share the same crankshaft, but I'm guessing there must be some efficiencies or where weight is
Yeah.
moving there,
Yeah.
stuff like that. My old way of thinking was V was always grunt, right? So, and being able to when Rossi did the Yamaha and changed the motor, was he the one that went to the Big Bang and when he jumped off Honda and tried Yamaha and he tried a couple of different engine configurations. I'm pretty sure I read it in his
Might
book.
have been, yeah.
Um, and he said this one here is the slowest motor you have, but this is the one that will work. And it was to do with tractability, right? So he had more rear end grip and drive from that particular motor, whatever motor he chose when he moved to Yamaha to develop, because he could get the power to the ground um, the best with that style of motor. So I
Yeah.
would assume that that's what that would be about, right? So V twins, V4s, in theory, should be able to put power down easier than an inline four, but that's outside my realms of knowledge.
Yeah. I don't know much about them. I always thought V motor, more engine brake. It was one of the big
Oh
things that
yeah,
I've noticed. They brake a lot more on ranges, but they were V twins. I think I've never ridden. Yes, I have. I ridden the Panigale S at
oh, yeah.
East Creek, and I think you did too.
I didn't ride a Panigale, no.
You rode
Um,
the H2 Kawasaki at Phillip Island.
yeah. I have tried a V4R at Taupo, and yeah, but I think those. those machines are different. They're on such a different planet
Yeah.
to what we usually ride. It'd be really interesting to jump on something that's an inline, a high level inline four, like your HP4 race, and then jump to a V4R and see if you can feel the characteristics of the
Yeah.
engine
Right.
there.
Interesting.
That would be really really intriguing. Yeah, for me, it was always bottoming and grunt, the V's. And when I raced against 650 twins, they had grunt out of the turn, right? And when I rode one probably 4 years later. It was just so much easier to roll the gas on and get into the gas earlier than my little four-cylinder screamer. It felt like it was easier work. So,
There might be
yeah,
something. Yeah, I'm going to do some research for the next podcast.
yeah, nice. I
V4,
know
line
the,
four.
the, the whole reason a V8 was ever created in a motor vehicle was for balance. So, back in the day, in the
Right.
early 1900s, they'd have 12-cylinder straight inline engines. And so what they found was balance was really hard. You could keep bolt and cylinders on, but the thing became out of balance. And so the V configuration was a beautifully balanced engine. So you
Right.
could make it big but balanced. So therefore, you could get revolutions out of it.
And you get
That's
space. I think it's space saving on both of them too, including the V4 on the in the bikes. Not as
absolutely.
wide. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That Panigale is it's like a tiny little bike, eh? It's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. And if we think back to the 80s, the CBX, I've never ridden one. I'd love to.
I have a six
CBX
cylinder,
1000.
the six.
And the Kawasaki did a 1300 as well, right?
Yeah.
And Honda they did something very specky to try and they made their 1000 as narrow as a four cylinder,
Yeah.
the way that they had set it up. And it was very, I think it was to do with where they put the alternators and flywheels and all that. They mounted them gear driven inboard instead of having them on the end of the crankshaft. So, but apparently it was a beautifully smooth motorcycle, one of the smoothest there is, right? So,
Well, BMW
uh,
have that 1600 cylinder.
oh yeah,
Yeah, they K 1600 or something. I've never
yeah,
ridden one, but I'm led to believe that they handle in a way that they shouldn't.
yeah,
Like that was the way it was described to me. They go, it shouldn't handle that way, but it
yeah,
does,
yeah,
as in good.
yeah,
And that's not that big a motor, yet it's a
yeah,
1600
yeah,
cylinder.
yeah.
Okay, some more research. I'm going to bring that up next time. I want to know I want to know the real difference between a V4 and a inline four.
Mm.
Um, let's end with something funny. I've got some jokes for you.
Fine. Okay.
I only found these this morning. So anyone listening, don't get upset. They're just jokes, okay?
Just jokes. Disclaimer.
Goldwing owners are like magpies. When they see something shining, they pick it up and bolt it to their motorcycle.
Yeah,
It's so true.
they do. They do. But matte black is the new shiny, right? So now they're blacking everything out.
Yeah,
So
true.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How can you tell that a BMW rider and his passenger are having an affair? Their
That's
jackets
them.
don't match yet.
And they don't have BMW on them. Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
What's the difference between a Harley and a Hoover? The position of the dirt bag.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they're both on top.
Yeah, coppers would like that one.
Mm.
What's the cheapest thing on a BMW motorcycle? The rider.
Ooh. Oh, might be getting some hate mail from that one.
The theme here, Harleys and Goldwings and BMWs. My last one is a Harley one. It's my favorite of the list. How do you know when your Harley is out of oil?
Out of oil. There's none left on the ground. I don't know.
It stops leaking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Anyway, on that note, thanks again, Chappy. Great chatting to
yeah,
you.
good
And
fun.
we'll come up with a theme for the next one
Yeah.
and have fun out there. Don't forget, people, if you're listening, go and have a look at Track Bike Hire on Facebook. And if you're in New Zealand, go and hire one of them little bikes. I'm going to do it.
I'm gonna come over. Gonna come over. That's it. That's
Oh, yeah.
it. Yeah, and I think it'd be cool to go through some suggestions when people have some suggestions. What other things that we could chat about, right? So if someone writes in and says, "I'd like to discuss this," or get people on board, yeah, let's do a bit of that too.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll make a comment on that when we post this. So thanks again, mate. I'll catch you again soon.
We will. I'll see you very shortly in an exotic location.
And then, yeah, let's clarify that. Let's not leave it on that. Let's just leave it on that. Let's just leave it on that.